Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Jonathan Cohn, and today I will be doing a video on the books and series that I have not yet finished, but I do intend to finish at some point. And this is a list of series where I've started it. I've read one book, I've read multiple books in the series, but I have not read through the final book in the series as it stands now. And these are books and series that I'm really interested in continuing on with. And I will have a companion video for books and series where I've read some and I just probably won't be reading anymore. And also, eventually, we'll have a series on books where I've read a few books in the series, and I might continue on, but I might not. So we'll see whether or not that happens. But for today's video, I have 8 series that I have read, I've enjoyed it, and I definitely want to keep reading on. And so the first book on my list is the Dresden Files. I've read the first 3 books, Stormfront, Full Moon, and my favorite of the 3, Grave Peril. I thought these were fun reads. They felt like you take a Sherlock Holmes or Agatha Christie mystery, throw in some fantastical elements like the creatures and the magic. You know, it's like a dark version of Harry Potter in some ways, and then you mesh them together. I would say this is like an American version of Fantastic Beasts if it was darker and if it was set in Chicago. And you take the mystery element with the fantastical and you put them together in this urban setting, and it's super interesting. They're very easy reads, they're quick reads, they're fun reads, and particularly I thought Grave Peril was a fantastic book that I loved reading. And after reading the first 2 books I read a couple of years ago, I thought they were fine, didn't love them. I actually didn't really like the second one, but when I read Grave Peril, I was like, this is amazing, and I couldn't wait to pick up the next book. I have the next book on my shelf, on my TBR. I intend to read it soon. I will for sure have a video review up of it eventually. I love, my favorite character in the series is Michael Carpenter, and I can't wait to read more of him. I mean, I love Dresden and the other characters as well, but Michael Carpenter is my favorite, and I cannot wait to read more of the Dresden Files. So that's my number 1. My number 2 is The Poppy War. I have read the first 2 books in the Poppy War series, called the first one, The Poppy War, and The Dragon Republic. I thought Poppy War was very good, but I thought that The Dragon Republic was really impressive and really is important to the genre. And I was surprised because I normally disagree with some of the reviewers that I follow. It's funny, I like to follow several reviewers on YouTube for books, but I find that I disagree with them very often on their tastes. And one of the BookTube reviewers who has really pushed this series, I actually found myself agreeing with them on this book. I thought the first one was good, but the second one was great. And I am excited to get into the book 3, which is called The Burning God, which I also have on my TBR. It'll be a little bit further down the road that I get to that book, but I do have it on my TBR to be read. And so I'm really excited to read that book. And that's exciting because once I read that book, I can scratch this whole trilogy off. I will have finished this series. And so that's my number 2. I will say what makes that series great is the kind of world building around Chinese folklore. That's what really makes it so strong. The third book series is the Faithful and the Fallen series by John Gwynne. The first book was called Malice, and the second book is called Valor. And there are 2 more books in the original set of 4, and then there is like a sequel series, but I'm talking specifically about the first 4. And I enjoyed the first 2 books very much. They're very different. They kind of have, if Game of Thrones' world building was meshed with kind of a grimmer, darker tone, but not so dark that it's horror or anything. I really enjoyed reading those 2 books. I thought some of the characters were great. I really like a lot of the tropes that Gwynne uses. Probably of all the books and series, I really like the tropes of this one the most. He does a good job with them. And it just feels so lived in and so interesting how the characters are hopping around the map. And I really like when you put maps in your books and I can see where the journey that the characters are going on, and oh my goodness, they're going to run into these characters because they're both heading in the same direction. And John Gwynne always has epic battles towards the end of his books, which are very enjoyable. So that's my number 3 most anticipated to read. Then my number 4 is The Forgotten Realms. I read the first 6 books. I thought books 1 and 2 were utterly fantastic. I thought book 4 was fine. I thought books 3 and 5 were not so good. And I thought book 6, the one I reviewed most recently on the channel, The Halfling's Gem, was perfectly adequate. Not amazing, but not bad. Perfectly adequate. And I've heard that he gets better in his writing overall. I've heard that a lot of people consider that first trilogy, the Homeland trilogy, to be his best. But the Dark Elf trilogy, I should say. But he does get better and do have some great writing later on down the road. So I am interested in reading the next few books. And I know there's a ton of, not just Forgotten Realms novels, but specifically a ton of Drizzt novels. And so I do want to get to all of those. I've read I saw there's something like 300 Dresden novels, which I was like, whew, that's a lot, but I'm intrigued, so I will want to read those. So that is my number 4. My number 5 is The Sword of Truth by Terry Goodkind. And I read the first book, Wizard's First Rule, which as a whole was a very good book, but there was just an extended sequence, about 150 pages, that was just brutal and hard to get through, and I could not stand that sequence. And in the second book, there wasn't a single sequence that lasted a lot of pages, but there were individual scenes that I didn't like. And I don't particularly love Goodkind's world building, but I do like the tropes he uses, and I do like the characters that he uses. And so I thought that, and I just find Goodkind interesting as an author for how hated he is among the community, and in some other parts of the community, how beloved he is. And also his political views were also very interesting to me. So I am excited to read more of The Sword of Truth. I have books 3 and 4. I will get to them sometime. I thought at the beginning of the year, I'm going to read book 3 in March and book 4 in April and book 5. No, that's not happening. I have too many books on my TBR to read that much of a series so quickly. But I intend to get to at least book 3 before the end of the year. What's the next book on my list? The next book on my list is my number 6 series, the Red Rising series. I read the first Red Rising book, adequately titled Red Rising, and the second book, Golden Sun. Thought both were fine novels. I enjoyed the first one a little bit more. The second one I struggled with a little bit, but I still enjoyed it. Everyone said it was Hunger Games in space, which I get, but it didn't work for me entirely, but everyone says the third book's great, and everyone says he even gets better as an author. Pierce Brown does, and I am interested in reading more. It is not a series that I will read this instant, but I have the third book, and I may as well finish out the first trilogy. I can't promise I will keep going with the series if I'm not invested in it, but I'll at least finish the third book in the trilogy at some point soon, and so I do have that book to read. My number 7 series on this list is the Shannara series. You've probably heard me talk on this channel quite a few times about the Shannara series. It was my first fantasy series to ever read, and it was really what got me into my love of the genre. The first complete series that I read, and I read this series like back to back, was the Wheel of Time series. But the first series that I first got into was Shannara, specifically the first book, The Sword of Shannara, which is still one of my favorite single fantasy novels of all time. And I've really enjoyed most of Brooks's works, and he has a way of making everything similar yet different, having the same tropes, the same overall story structure, but changing aspects. This book's more apocalyptic. This book's more romantic. This book's more quest adventure oriented. This book's more political. This book's more druid focused. This book's more elves focused. You know, he makes it just different enough that I'm like, ooh, there's an element to this I need to really read. And so there are the last two, the last trilogy and then the tetralogy. I need to read both of those, and then I'll have finished all the books in that series. I know that he retconned his Word and Void series as part of the Shannara universe, and so I'll get to those eventually, but they're not books titled The Blank of Shannara or anything, so I don't feel compelled to read those quite yet, but I might read those eventually. But for sure, I will finish the last 7 books that I haven't gotten to yet. The final series on this list is The Expanse, and if there's ever been a book series that I have had no excuse, it is The Expanse. I've had books 2 and 3 of The Expanse on my TBR for so long, and there was a point where literally like every month I was putting off The Expanse. Every single month I was like, I'm going to read it. Okay, no. Okay, no. It was never a priority, and I do want to read it because I really enjoyed the first book, Leviathan Wakes, and I've heard that the series as a whole is a great series. I have my brother-in-law loved it, and then also a friend of mine from work, he binged it all back to back to back to back, and he loved reading the series, and so I'm really intrigued in reading more of it. The sci-fi world building, the epic scope of it was really interesting, but yet it still has a core group of characters that I really appreciated. I did not like all of the worldviews in that series, so that's why it's my number 8. It's really low on my list, but still, I highly enjoyed the first book, and so I do want to keep reading with that series. And I may read all the way to the last book, Leviathan Falls, but I may not. We'll see. So those are my 8 books of series that I'm in the middle of, that I intend to keep reading, intend to finish, because I am super excited to read them. If you've read any of these series, let me know which ones you're more excited for me to read and review. And if you haven't read them, let me know which ones you are most interested in hearing more about. And if you have a series that you really like that you think I should start or read, please let me know down in the comments section below. But until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching.